It's 7 o'clock. I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is the Town of Wolfeboro Planning Board meeting on June 15th, 2021. The first item is to introduce the planning board members. Susan Replier. Here. Von Dugan. Here. Peter Goodwin.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Mike Hodder is here and closing his windows. Brad Harriman.
Here.
And Julie Jacobs.
I'm here.
Okay, good. Apparently, John is not here, so Julie, if you'd be willing to sit in as the alternate.
I will.
Taking John's place.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. Okay, there are no public hearings tonight, so these are, the next item on the agenda is a report from the various committees. So the short-term rental committee, we had a meeting on, we mentioned that you were here, and also I'm here. My name is Kathy Barnard.
Present.
Sorry. Okay, we had a short-term rental meeting on June 7th, 2021. Basically, after some discussion, planning board or the committee made a recommendation to the planning board that they start the process of amending the single-family definition to make the definition more stringent to address the issue. That motion was seconded and the motion passed. Also mentioned was that we need more information about the grandfathering of the event. Tavis, do you want, well, first of all, before we get started, I did receive an email from people, member of the public, saying that they hope that planning board members would recuse themselves if they had topics on the agenda. Tavis, do you want to just speak to that issue for us, please?
Sure, and without pretending to be legal counsel, the short gist of it is planning board members should contemplate with any discussion if they have any personal interest in the discussion topic. It becomes most important if a board member has any fiscal interest or would financially benefit from an action of the board. So it's not something that the chair needs to go around and says, Julie, do you seek any financial benefit? Brad, do you, et cetera? But each member should do a little personal introspective and see if anything the board is discussing may have a financial benefit to them personally, and at least make the board aware. It's also up to the member to recuse themselves if they feel it appropriate for that discussion topic, whether it be a site plan review, subdivision, or even a text amendment.
Okay.
So that's just something for every board member to think about. My recommendation is that we just let that sit, and if somebody believes that, you know, in this case, short-term rental or the 10-year plan, Route 28 project, or revisions to Pine Hill, anything that's on the agenda, the member, when that topic comes up, should just say, Madam Chair, I believe I need to recuse myself from this item, and then you proceed. Now, if everyone has a financial interest, perhaps the board should discuss it and perhaps table it to a later meeting. What you don't want to do is have everyone recuse and ultimately not have a quorum and not be able to move forward. So that's just something to keep in mind.
So, Tavis, you know, life changes and things transpire. You age and maybe you don't want to live here full time and you want to put your home in a short-term rental that you're not doing now. How does that fit into that equation?
I will leave that to every person to come up with their own personal opinion as to whether at any point in the discussion it turns to something. I would think it's more immediate than perhaps in 20 years or perhaps in 5 years. But if, for example, a planning board member owned the better half of Port Wedland or any neighborhood, I just picked that at random, then perhaps there would be some need to at least disclose to the board that sentiment.
Okay, go ahead, Mike.
Madam Chairwoman, we've spent some time on this issue. Is there a particular reason why it's arisen now?
Only because
No,
Kathy and I both received
No, I was
an
just
email.
referring to an email that I received, and I asked Tavis to speak to it. That's
Okay.
all.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, that's why I tried to address it very generically. It could be any topic.
I think that my experience, I found board members are quite sensitive about recusal and conflicts of interest and regularly recuse themselves when they detect
Right.
such a conflict. I don't
Sure.
think there's an issue that needs really to be reemphasized. That's the reason why I raised the issue.
Yeah. Agreed.
Okay, great. Okay, meanwhile, back to the short-term rental subcommittee. One of the issues that the committee wanted this board to look at was the amending the single-family definition to make it more stringent to address this issue. Tavis, do you want to give us some of your thoughts on that issue?
Well, I'm happy to point to it. The short-term rental committee asked, 2 meetings ago, asked 2 questions of town council. The first one, and you have it in front of you. I put a handout in front of you that includes both of those motions, but for the sake of the record, the first was to ask legal counsel whether the use as a vacation rental / short-term rental in New Hampshire Bill 458 amended RSA 674-16 is a permitted use under the zoning regulation or ordinances in any district within the boundaries of the town of Wolfeboro. The second was a motion to seek clarification from town's legal counsel to see whether the collection of a business tax for a short-term rental or vacation rental is defined as a business for profit in New Hampshire. And on the back side of that same handout, in town council's original purple font, are the answers to those questions. The short answer to those questions is that collection, or rather payment of rooms and meals tax for short-term rentals does not automatically make something commercial. So keep in mind that we think of residential neighborhoods as residential uses and commercial is not allowed. All this answer is providing is that payment of rooms and meals does not make it commercial and therefore a violation. The longer answer deals with the town's current definition of one-family dwelling. Remember, it's not single-family dwelling, it's one-family dwelling. And the way it's currently defined, short-term rental is okay. And that's in the legal opinion. I just paraphrased about a page. And that was presented to the short-term rental committee. So the question then became, and the basis of the motion was, should the planning board be encouraged or directed to look at the definition of one-family dwelling to tighten it such that short-term rentals were no longer permitted?
Transient.
Short-term, transient, what have you. For example, if you look at the definition of single-family dwelling or one-family dwelling in Portsmouth, it's very clear that it is a place of residence. So one must establish a residency in order to comport with their definition. Ours does not. It talks about an assemblage of rooms with independent cooking and sanitary and living facilities for a family. And if you look at this, it basically says it doesn't matter if that family is there for a day, 10 days, or lifelong residence. So where this becomes interesting, and a point that I raised to the same committee, if the definition is changed to say that a one-family dwelling needs to be a place of residence, all of those that are currently doing short-term rentals or can currently do transient short-term vacation rentals are legal right now, and they will remain legal once the definition is changed. You can't change the definition. Anytime you pass a new law, you can't hold those that have already legally established that use accountable to the new law. For the same reason, if in 1987 somebody built a shed with a 5-foot side yard setback, and today's rules say 20, by changing the side yard setback to 20 feet, we don't have the authority to go back and make everybody move their shed over. It's literally a use of that yard the same way it is currently a use of that residence. So I just offer that for the planning board to consider should you want to move forward with language changes.
Okay, and then the other issue that came up was to ask the selectmen to talk to the police about increasing their enforcement powers so that they could deal with some of the noise issues that have been brought to their attention. So that's another thing that this committee wanted the planning board to deal with.
So something the planning board may wish to consider would be a motion or directive for staff to prepare a memo, something to that effect, to go to the selectmen, asking them to increase police powers to the extent possible to better address noise or vandalism or parking issues and things of that sort. One of the things that was brought up at the short-term rental committee was the sort of increased level of enforcement. So your first noise complaint is X penalty, your second is a Y penalty, and then a Z penalty, and perhaps even the ability to assign those penalties or fees associated with them to the property owner. That is something I believe the selectmen will likely need to engage counsel on to see if that is appropriate. The reason I suggest that now is that a noise infraction is not a land use infraction. It's a separate set of things. And typically, if somebody builds without a building permit, that is a change in the use of that property that was done without permission. It's much different than a speeding ticket. For the same reason, in a strange analogy, that would be Kathy Barnard is pulled over for going 65 down South Main Street. We don't get to assign the ticket to the town of Wolfeboro or the state of New Hampshire because it's their roadway. It's, in that instance, Kathy, I shouldn't use Kathy. She would never go 65, but you
could use me.
Yeah. Vaughn might go 65 down South Main Street. But the point being, the rules are set up and the planning board can help establish those land use rules that are appropriate. So I don't think the planning board can make recommendations on land use changes relative to how the police enforce their laws at all. But I do think the board, should it so desire, could make a recommendation to the select board saying, here's the feedback from our subcommittee, we agree, could you pursue this path further? And then the selectmen could take it from there.
Yeah.
And obviously the public could follow along and encourage the selectmen as they felt appropriate in doing so. Personally, I think the planning board could look at addressing symptoms, if not the root cause, if you will, of short-term rentals. But I think the board first has to decide if it has been raised either by the committee or personal experience or reading Facebook, if the board wants to look at that. Understanding from past board conversations, the state is going to look into it. And the only reason I'm going into this level of discussion on this is it was suggested by a short-term rental committee member that should the planning board elect not to pursue this, they may pursue their own petition warrant article. And my concern therein is if the town says, yes, we are 100% behind this warrant article, the town is then behind the proverbial 8-ball, if you will, for implementing everything to effectuate that petition. So it's now in your court to decide where the planning board wants to interject as you feel appropriate as a board.
Okay, go ahead, Mike.
Madam Chairwoman, I'd be happy to ask Tavis to direct a memo to the select board as he outlined, requesting additional and increased enhanced enforcement by the police department and an investigation by the Board of Selectmen into possibilities of enhancing police powers further than they currently exist to address some of the issues of noise, garbage, vandalism, congregation by unruly crowds in the water, and so on and so forth. I'd call that a motion.
Okay, all right.
Seconded.
Okay.
Given the state of our laws, we have decibel criteria. No, we don't have decibel criteria?
No, the only noise ordinance we have is unreasonable noise, and that's standard throughout the state, and it's really an undefinable amount of noise. It's basically as much noise as bothers the guy next door. But however that much is impossible to say. We don't have a decibel rating, and if you think about it, how would you measure the decibel rating of a noise? Would it be right next to the speaker, 10 feet away, across the street, in somebody else's living room, down the road? You know, we don't have those kinds of standards. And on what do you base the standards? 70 decibels is pretty loud, but for a guy like me who doesn't have a great deal of hearing left, maybe it's not so bad. So, you know, these sorts of standards are kind of difficult to establish. It's usually at the discretion of the responding officer. If he can hear it in his cruiser and he's 3 blocks away, it's probably pretty loud. You know, then I think the law was written specifically to be as indeterminate as it is, to allow the flexibility to respond to different circumstances.
Okay. Go ahead, Julie.
Can I back up just a little bit, Tavis? You said that Portsmouth has, for their one-family dwellings, made them residences? The family, a residence, how do they figure that out?
Portsmouth is not alone. There are a number of towns in New Hampshire that have defined a one-family residence, which then implies residence. So it's anything greater than 185 days, typically. So it dovetails with the rooms and meals tax. So Portsmouth got a lot of attention, and people keep pointing at Portsmouth because they had the working stiff case, where somebody built an accessory dwelling unit and used it for a short term, and it was determined not to be a residence because people were coming in and out of it. So their definition of dwelling unit, and I don't want to misquote their ordinance, their language was set up from long ago to say that it was a place of residence. So anything short of qualifying as a residence was then not a permitted use, and that's how working stiff case worked. I apologize for any attorney watching this, because I brutalized a lot of court, but that's basically the takeaway.
That's the only case. Julie, can you put your mic closer to your mouth because people in the back can't hear you? All of us?
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
We don't
All right,
enunciate as well as we should.
We'll do our best.
Okay.
The working stiff case is the only case the Supreme Court has ruled on regarding short-term rentals, and it's only with specific application to Portsmouth and Portsmouth's definition of transient use. And that definition had been in effect prior to working stiff turning their operation into a short term, which is how they got caught. But in addition, one should remember that there was an awful lot of arguing backwards and forwards before that case got to the Supreme Court, and there was an awful lot of arguing in the court during its hearing as well, both pro and con working stiff partners. There are arguments to be made on the side of short-term rentals, which can be persuasive. We've seen them. Our town attorney is representing a group of short-term rental businessmen up in Conway to allow short-term rentals in Conway as a right, as a use. The case can be argued. There's strong arguments on both sides. My suggestion is let's go after the enforcement side first, and then, if I may, continue to the point of changing our ordinances at this stage. I think, one, it would be ineffectual, as Tavis showed. Everything that's in existence currently is grandfathered. If the town votes to change our definition, everything up until that time is grandfathered. And secondly, Conway is in a fight with its local STRs, and they have asked for a Carroll County Superior Court declarative judgment on the entire issue, which won't be forthcoming for a while. But I would suggest that rather than writing an ordinance, which may or may not later on stand up and cost us money to find out, that we stick to the enforcement side for now and let other towns fight it out and bleed on the floor, and then when it's all done, come in and craft an ordinance however the town wants it crafted and the planning board thinks is appropriate to deal with short-term rentals. That's my suggestion to the board.
Okay, any other comments? There's a motion with a second on the floor here. This is time to comment, if anyone wants to comment. Okay, then I'll call the question that Mike's motion is to ask the selectmen to look at enhancing the police powers as it goes to noise and other nuisance issues, right, Mike?
Essentially.
Yeah, okay.
Essentially.
And nuisance issues. So all in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I'm going to
Okay.
abstain, Kathy,
Okay, all
just
right.
because it's setting it to the board that I sit on.
Yeah, that would be good.
It's a good point. You'd be telling yourself, wouldn't you?
Yep.
Okay, thanks, Brad. All right. Okay, so as far as the short-term rentals, then what Mike is suggesting, that we hold off on the residential, looking at it to see if we want to change it, and just go to the selectmen, see if there's some way that we can get something done this year. So that's where we are. Go ahead, Tavis.
Well, all I was going to ask is if the planning board would like to stay, if you will, the short-term residential committee until the planning board wants to re-engage or ask a new question? Or if you want them to keep meeting, and if so, what are they to address? So I just think that should be clear from this level.
Okay, well, we did at the last meeting, there was one more issue that they really wanted to discuss, and that was that grandfathering.
Correct.
And it seems that we should go ahead and discuss that. And then after that, go on to some sort of a rest period or whatever you
That's
want
just
to
it.
call it.
I was wondering how to help the committee end the next meeting.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that was kind of the thought.
Okay.
Well, our next meeting is scheduled for July 12th.
Yes.
So it's, yeah, shall we wrap it up for a few months and based on what?
Based on the fact that Conway is taking this to court, want to see how that turns out, and to see if the selectmen will do something as far as some of the concerns that we've heard from people about
Right.
the disrupting neighborhood issues.
Okay, and if there's any way that we could have it wrapped up in time for our next meeting, I know the public is eager to hear our plan for the summer. We have people who are very nervous and already experiencing problems. So if we could have the selectmen have an answer ready for us by the July 12th meeting as to how they're going to act, that would be great.
Well, I don't really have the authority to do that. I mean, it's up to the selectmen.
I'm happy to do everything I can to have a memo prepared and to them.
Yes, but not for
Where they
tomorrow.
go with it and what action they decide to take and how long that takes,
Right,
I don't know.
yeah, but it probably would not be heard until their first meeting in July.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, anything else on this? Okay, great. All right, New Hampshire DOT Route 28. Tavis, do you have a report on that?
I do. It's basically just a brief update for the planning board. I asked Kathy just before the meeting, and she said the planning board hadn't been, as a group, entirely involved in the Route 28 corridor study committee. Functionally, the short version of this is the town is on the DOT 10-year plan with a project to upgrade functionally South Main Street. There's a lot of money involved. The state is interested, as it always is, from white line to white line, and also looking at some improvements between the lines. Also included with that are any number of efforts to slow the traffic down. So they're going to be looking at where and how crosswalks occur, whether that be pop-outs, rapid flashing beacons, all of the above, drainage enhancements, improvements, additional landscaping along the corridor, additional signage, et cetera. What is the preferred alternative that is cost feasible for Pickering Corner, ranging from not doing anything. At the onset, it was between not doing anything and full signalization. Obviously, full signalization has now been priced out. There's still potentially discussion about a roundabout. What would it look like? What would it take? And everything else that could fall into how to improve that intersection and how it flows. All I'm doing tonight is letting the board know that I have met now with Dave Ford and DOT. I'm going to reinvigorate the Route 28 committee and start that public outreach process. There's a whole public participation plan involved. There's a public action plan. There's 3 different versions, or 3 different groups focused on this. One of them is the committee that is going to get re-energized. I'm looking at July 8th for their first meeting so that we can get DOT will participate. We'll get the town basically re-engaged with this process. Currently, it looks as though this is going to be a fiscal year 24 project for DOT. Fiscal year 24 actually starts in October of 23. So during the CIP process that I will be, tomorrow night the selectmen are looking at setting the guidance or the guiding principles for this year's CIP process. I'll get the comment forms out following that to the department heads, but part of that process this year is going to be how does the town best anticipate raising those funds that are the town's match for the 10-year plan project. Knowing that the monies will have to be available best case by October of 23, is this going to be a partial taxation in 22 and a partial in 23 to raise the sum total, or is it going to be all in 23? So part of that will be the balancing act between CIP and the selectmen. We've already agreed to do a project, and we know what the numbers are. Don't ask me them, but it's known. And we know what the town's match is going to be. It's just going to be how are we going to ease this in to make sure the taxpayers know what they're going to get, why we're raising money, how it's going to evolve, when it's going to evolve, and all of that. I know Kathy is on that committee, but between the two of us, I hope to keep you guys well apprised of what's going on, because I believe it's absolutely critical to future land use decisions around that corridor to be well versed in what is coming in the very near future. So that's the update there.
Thank you. Okay, next item, the proposed revisions to Pine Hill and the C2 zoning districts. Tavis did prepare some information that he sent to us in our packet. Tavis, do you want to go through that?
I can go through it. Essentially, all that I did was take all of the uses that are currently listed in the commercial district C2 and move them over into the Pine Hill zoning district. That was something that was discussed very briefly during the LP gas discussion and at the following meeting of the planning board. So what's in your packet is first the Pine Hill Road Development District. And what I did very rudimentarily was go through with a highlighter and highlight those things that are in both districts currently. Then immediately following that, I went through and circled those uses in the commercial district C2. I circled those with orange, sort of came through as a dark yellow on the scan, but those uses that are in C2 and not listed in Pine Hill. And then at the very bottom of that packet of information is the Pine Hill Road Development District. And I typed in red italics all of the C2 uses that I moved over. I didn't make any edits to this. I literally, if it was in C2 and not in Pine Hill, I moved it over. But those are the discussions that need to start with the board, and I'm happy to provide input as the board requests it, should there be any changes to moving them all over or how best to do that. But my thought was to have the board decide what things probably don't belong in Pine Hill or ways to rephrase or group those uses, and then I will come back with a newer edition that is actually a revised Pine Hill.
Okay, very good. Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I thought the exercise was really well done, Tavis. Thank you very much for that. I just had a couple of comments. In general, all the uses you moved over from C2 to Pine Hill, in my opinion, should stay in Pine Hill because they were originally in Pine Hill and were dumped into C2, I think inadvertently, but nonetheless, they properly belong, in my opinion, in the Pine Hill Road Development District. There are a couple of fine-tuned notes. I notice in the list of uses in Pine Hill, in red, the last one, nonprofit housing for the elderly, in those portions of the town served by town water and sewer, there is no sewer up there.
Correct.
So that has to be changed. And in the old C2 list of uses, use M in C2 was affordable nonprofit housing for the elderly. That did not make it in the cut over to the Pine Hill Road Development District, and I think it should be there because it's an area that the Pine Hill Road, the Filter Bed Road Subcommittee was actually thinking about as being appropriate for affordable housing. Did I miss something?
I think it has to do with the age of your reference material.
The age of my reference material. I'm going off what you sent us.
I'm not seeing,
On on commercial C2,
yeah,
the third page of that has an M, affordable nonprofit housing for the elderly, on my printout.
oh, you're correct, I missed one. I apologize.
All right, so no problem. But that's easy. Just move that over into Pine Hill Road, and then you've got all of the uses that I thought properly belonged there. But there's one additional wrinkle that I'm kind of hesitant to bring up, but nonetheless needs to be. If we strip C2 of its uses and then destroy it as a district, which is essentially the right thing to do because it's just a park and you can't do anything in it except sit down and have lunch, we would then be removing the adult business use from the town's zoning. 17553 defines adult business, and it limits it only to the C2 district.
But it's interestingly not listed in C2.
I know. That's another inadvertency. We excuse the previous occupant of your chair for having not done that, but now that we know that it needs to be dealt with, we have a problem of we cannot not permit this stuff somewhere in town, because if we don't permit it, we're in violation of basically First Amendment rights, and we get into trouble that way. So we have to put it somewheres, and I thought about where, and I would prefer it not be anywhere, but since I have to put it someplace, I would suggest you go into Pine Hill Road Development District.
And where, Mike?
In the Pine Hill Road Development District, as the only part of town that I think is the least offensive part of town in which to locate an adult business. And given the setbacks that are surrounding that use in 17563, there are a limited number of places where it could go in the Pine Hill Road Development District. And I think that that would provide the town with additional protections, as well as locating the use off the beaten track, so to speak, and away from the view of most people who are coming here during the summer and most people who live here.
Yeah, I don't know if those comments should be expressed during the public hearing on such a change in that manner, because that might attract attention.
You could call that probably personal opinion.
Yeah.
Well, I don't, I'm sorry, I don't get it. What is inappropriate?
It was a bit biased, Mike.
Proposing to put a use somewhere because it's least likely to be visible or presentable to anyone going through town.
It's okay. We understand.
Point made.
I understand where you're going, and I
Just being
misunderstood an earlier conversation we had, which is the next item on the agenda, which is putting that use in Wolfeboro Falls.
Had I
So
expressed these...
if the board would prefer or would recommend rather it go into Pine Hill under special exception, I'm happy to move that and disregard the next item on the agenda.
That's an issue that needs to be discussed by the planner, possibly the chair, to see exactly how it would work out.
Right.
But
Well, and there's one issue, both from an enforcement standpoint and an implementation permitting standpoint, I've been wrapping my head around, and it's completely separate from this. But the zoning ordinance, as many of you are probably aware, currently does not permit a contractor's yard within 1,000 feet of another parcel having a contractor yard.
Oh.
And following a ZBA non-public, I had discussion with council about that, because to me that smacks of not quite fair. If Susan and I live next to one another and I come in and obtain the appropriate permits for a permittable use within the zone that then precludes her from doing the same, is that legal? And the answer to that was yes. So what I would suggest is that wherever the board decides or directs staff to relocate adult-oriented businesses, I would propose the same thing as I did in Wolfeboro Falls, where it's a special exception and none shall be located within 1,000 feet of another parcel containing such a use. Because I think that really gets to the intent of where the town is going. We can't zone it out.
I think 17553 makes 500 feet currently as a distance between each particular expression of that use.
But I would offer the board has the ability
We could.
to put that distance wherever.
Can we add that distance from the road so that we don't end up with a strip of,
Well, this is a discussion for another evening, but to me, if a zone allows contractors' yards, we're not benefiting the greater public by spreading it out every 1,000 feet from each parcel, because now you've spread out the noise, the dust, all of the things that special exception need to consider. By the same token, if you put too many of them close together, you may have an exponential noise problem that is louder than any individual. So I think it's something the board needs to discuss or consider discussing at a later date, not tonight.
Yeah, it just sounds to me like, if you're going to have retail stores, but you're going to say, you can have one here, but now we have to have an empty space. You can have one here and an empty space. That's what it sounds like to me, and it doesn't sound efficient, and it just doesn't sound quite right. Like, why would we say, no, you can't go next to each other because you're related?
Well, and I said, well, in that particular instance, if you grant a special exception here for a use that the neighbor has a right at the onset to also have, but by virtue of granting the special exception here, you're denying the person of that, the answer was no, they could get a variance. I said, but now we've raised the bar for the next door neighbor. And where this becomes interesting specifically is the zoning district that they're in and the size of the parcels involved. Many of the people that own parcels that you could put a contractor's yard in the middle of and the neighbor would not hear or see are controlled by the conservation subdivision language of the past, where they can't even subdivide in the future. Perhaps it's a benefit, perhaps it's a concern. It would be very easy for many of these parcels to put their lot into two and end run the rule. Now my neighbor doesn't have it, but I don't think that's what the planning, we'll have a full discussion on this at a later date. Anyway, the reason I'm bringing it up is because of the adult-oriented business relative to Pine Hill. I think the board has every legal ability to either keep the 500 feet or go to 1,000 feet. You know, it is literally an arbitrary number. The reason I went to 1,000 feet was because if you look at the horizontal parameters of Pine Hill District or Wolfeboro Falls, you're essentially looking at one business,
Right.
which may or may not be the intent of the board.
Yeah,
So
okay.
I'd just like to make a clarification so that everybody understands. You're saying adult. In our ordinance, it's sexually. So just to be clear, that's what we're talking about. Sexually oriented businesses.
Right, adult businesses.
Where did it say that, Vaughn? What page is
It
that
says
on?
that in the red text that's proposed for the Wolfeboro Falls Limited Business District. So I presume that's come from our ordinance.
Oh,
Where,
I thought we were in the other one.
No, we are, but that's where
Oh.
we've right now landed on
Right.
putting this use. The next page. I just want to clarify.
Yeah, that's what they mean by adult.
I still don't see it. I remember reading it, but I just don't see it.
So just go to the next memo, and you'll see it.
Is in the memo?
Yeah,
there it is.
the definition in the definition section is sexually oriented businesses, otherwise defined as an adult arcade, adult bookstore, video store, adult cabaret, adult motion picture. So yes, to be
Clear.
sexually oriented businesses,
Yeah.
yes.
do you have another copy of this Wolfeboro Falls Limited Business District proposed uses paper? Because I do not have one.
You can have mine.
I don't have one here. I mean, I can make one if you need one.
Just, could you email me one? Give that back to her, and I'll look at this.
Before we leave this particular paperwork, can I ask a couple of stupid questions that I'm maybe
Yep,
thinking
go
of?
ahead.
On page 1 of 3 here, the Chapter 175 zoning, 17596 permitted uses. A, it says one of the following dwelling units, then it says a single detached dwelling, and then one accessory apartment. What is an accessory apartment?
It's an accessory dwelling unit. That's another typo. That's a carryover from prior language.
Okay,
So what, I mean.
Okay, it's
to
just
talk-
bad wording.
To talk about all the changes, I don't think it's necessary to stipulate in each of the zones, one single detached dwelling, one accessory dwelling unit. I mean, it's by statute that anywhere you can put a one single, you can have an accessory dwelling unit.
right, that's what I
Right.
thought. That's why I couldn't understand why the words were different.
But I didn't change it because I want everyone to see the evolution of the language. So if we want to change that moving forward, it will be one single detached dwelling per lot, 2, one accessory dwelling unit, 3, one duplex.
And that old language was accurate back then because we didn't have the ADU law,
Right, it just
Correct.
hasn't changed
Yeah.
since 17 to catch up.
right?
I
So-
would urge you, sorry,
So if and when we get this thing all ready to go squished together, we're going to update the language, correct?
Well, it's going to be up to the board. If you want a
But I mean, is that
proposal
the-
to go through each of the zoning districts to change that, that's fine. Or we can just do it as the
As we go.
districts come up, yes.
As we go. So I had wording questions in other parts, so maybe they should just wait till then.
otherwise you're going to be getting to the town with an enormous warrant if you're going to be making all
Yeah.
these sorts of substantive changes. I did not see that memo with the uses for Wolfeboro Falls Limited Business District prior to just now. So, yeah, unfortunately,
It wasn't in the packet?
it wasn't in my packet.
Yeah,
Interesting. I apologize.
All right, because otherwise I would not have proposed adult business into Pine Hill. I would have argued against it being in Wolfeboro Falls and then proposed it to Pine Hill.
But
I don't-
look
but
at the
that's just-
efficiency. Look at the efficiency. We got the same answer.
We got to the same answer. I would also, if you're going to rewrite Pine Hill to include adult business as a special exception, which is what I would suggest that we do, make it as stringent a use as possible, but nonetheless possible. I would also ask you to take a look at 17553, its language, I don't believe that ordinance was ever finished.
Okay, I will do that.
There's no, for example, allowance for licensing. There's no allowance for certification of, I'm not going to go there.
Okay.
There's a whole bunch of things that
I will
that
take a look and make some recommendations.
need to be put into an adult business ordinance if it's to stand the test. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, let's see, as far as the C2 district is concerned, we're talking about moving banks, indoor theaters, public recreation use. You think that should go into the Pine Hill area?
So just to be clear, C2 is that one parcel that's a park. Should we
That's
just
right.
eliminate the district?
Yeah,
What-
the follow-up recommendation would be to rezone the parcel currently zoned C2, C1.
Okay.
It really doesn't matter what it's zoned because it's a park.
But to have a whole nother ordinance in here,
Well,
C2.
it needs a zoning district, so
Correct.
it
So
makes,
make it-
makes a lot of sense to make it part of the downtown,
Correct.
right?
And C2 would then dissolve, and the point here is to take the uses from C2 and put it into Pine Hill.
So I have a question. So on page 2 of 3, almost at the bottom, so am I reading that the storage of volatile fuels, garages and filling stations will now be a permitted use in the Pine Hill district, the Pine Hill Business District?
It would be if this was accepted as drafted, yes.
Because that's the thing that was left out when they did the Pine Hill,
I understand.
got chopped off.
But that's another discussion. It could go as an exception.
I would like that to be another discussion.
Storage of volatile, well, the one thing I'm going to point out to the board is storage of volatile fuels is not defined as a use in the definitions. So I think one of the things I would encourage the board to do is consider, is that really saying gas station in a roundabout way? Because I will tell you, at least my first read of it, insofar as it says storage of volatile fuels, garages, filling or service stations. Signs on such stations may include temporary advertising matters, can be confined to the pump
Storage.
island, and other signs that describe products obtainable on the premise. This limits standard product signs to a maximum of 24 square feet. That to me does not say storage of volatile fuels. That says that's a gas station.
It's a filling station.
That's underground stations, it's a filling station, it's a service station. You can get your tires rotated, you can get your oil changed, you can buy car air fresheners. And the way the signage is described talks about buy 2 sodas of your flavor for $3 and things of that sort.
I think
so. Where I've heard the board going seems to be redefining the definition of storage. Perhaps you have storage, dry warehouse, storage, fuels, volatile substances. We have a definition for volatile fuels, but it's tied into hazardous substances, toxic or hazardous substances. Storage of volatile fuels is not a defined use. And the way this is providing its own definition and description,
Yeah.
I know where, I think I understand where at least some of the board wants to go, but I don't think this is a clear definition of where you're going, Susan, with storage of volatile fuels, diesel fuel, gasoline.
And there used to be such a place right behind the freight shed. You know, there was a
Yes.
place that wasn't a gas station, that was storage of volatile fuels. We, as a
Well,
town,
Laner Street,
yeah, well, that too,
you could argue,
Yeah.
is storage of volatile fuels.
right.
The conundrum, in my mind, is that currently there's a definition of storage facility, and the board didn't accept, I mean, I don't take this personally, the board didn't accept where I landed with it, but when you follow what storage facility means and where the Supreme Court has gone with it, storage begets distribution, because otherwise why are you storing it? You're only storing it to distribute in some manner.
How about radioactive waste? That was my classic. Under your definition of storage, I can store uranium in a warehouse and distribute it to anybody who I have a license to give it
Let's
to.
remember, it's not my definition.
This is the one that you wanted to impose on the case of the LP gas.
Okay, but
We're at a difference of opinion. Right now, storage is storage. So what I just suggested was the board may want to consider parsing out what storage means to the board so it is very clear.
okay, so you're saying we need a new definition?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, all right.
In the case,
Otherwise, every time we have somebody storing something,
you're going
it
to
meets the definition of storage facility as it's currently defined. So if the objective is to define storage another way, then yes, in my opinion, the town should consider a new definition of storage.
And certainly not have storage of volatile fuels, comma, garages and filling stations. It's not comma.
That's how
It's two
staff-
separate things.
The staff, not just me, that's how staff could not get there with the previous application. But I don't want to get too far because there is some pending appeals.
yeah, that's true. In the way I read this little piece of text, it's as follows. Storage of volatile fuels, comma, that's one. Garages and filling or service stations, that's two. Signs on such stations, referring to use two. Blah, 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 blah. There's no further text regarding storage of volatile fuels. Storage of volatile fuels is distinguished specifically from garages and gas stations. Something other than a garage or a gas station was intended in the use of the word storage of volatile fuels.
Comma.
Exactly. There are three
So
intentions here.
I'll
two
go back to my
particular
point.
uses.
If two reasonably intelligent people can come
Storage
to
of
different
volatile
conclusions, I
fuels.
think it needs some attention.
Yes.
If I may, storage of volatile fuels was the use under which LP Gas originally got their propane storage right in Pine Hill Road. Had this been in effect
Right.
a couple of months ago, we would now have a storage of volatile fuels for diesel up there, but it wasn't. This is flexible enough to allow for that use.
Well, so we shouldn't debate that.
I think we should simply leave it as exactly as it is now. And if Tavis
You're
wants,
talking about N in C1, in
I'm talking
C1,
about in,
or the
N, yeah, N.
is it M?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, okay,
N
so
is
you're
in-
just talking about moving that one into the.
Correct.
Yeah,
And
okay,
if Tavis
fine,
wants
good.
to redefine
Yeah, okay.
storage, then that would be a useful exercise too.
Well, to me, the question is, okay, agree to disagree or agree to agree entirely on storage of volatile fuels, comma. Parse that out. Is the rest of this intended to be a regulation on gas stations? Because I may
Sounds
recommend
like
the
it, doesn't
board
it?
consider whether gas stations should be a special exception or whether the town, I think one of the people that read this said, see, this is how the town prevents gas stations in town. It's only in a district that you can't do anything with, and that's how Wolfeboro has prevented gas stations. I don't know if the planning board is morally opposed to gas stations or not, hypothetically, sarcastically, or otherwise. But the question is, if, absent, again, storage of volatile fuels, comma, if the rest of that is to regulate gas stations, does the board want to contemplate gas stations in Pine Hill? Or are there other areas of town that may be appropriate to have gas stations? Question mark.
I
So
asked,
that's
right.
where the storage
Yeah.
question, that to me, I mean, I can understand, you know, Mike's logic entirely on how he's reading that. But is it really, you know, is the planning board intending to not have gas stations anywhere? Or if gas stations are okay as a use, is Pine Hill the only place they could be? Because that is the other result of this.
Or it looks like right now they're only by special exception wherever they exist, or they're grandfathered.
Well, see, that's
Yeah.
the interesting thing, because I followed suit with C2 and moved storage of volatile fuels at all into permitted uses in the Pine Hill district. And there's been at least one comment tonight that storage of volatile fuels should be a special permitted use.
Special exception.
Either, well, go get
Yes.
special exception on this
Yeah.
pattern.
Okay.
So
All
again,
right, well,
if you
those
see-
are, yeah, those are the things that we've got to figure out, where
Yes.
we want this before it comes back. But anyway, it's
And
a
just
good
to
discussion.
make the water a little deeper, there are communities that look at gas stations, service stations, and the like, where you pull up, get gas, and leave, as a form of drive-through.
Oh,
So
right.
as the board goes through its forum on July 8th about drive-through, I think the board, and I'm happy to help with this, there are lots of things to consider in what the definition, should it manifest, of drive-through means.
Well, we're talking about drive-through restaurants.
I mean, in the same
Correct, but
thing.
if you pull up here, get gas and get a sandwich, or you would drive through, we just
Yeah.
have to make sure it very clear that drive-through is drive-through restaurants or restaurants with drive-through facilities.
Well, I think everybody's clear. I don't see why there's a need to muddy the waters here, Tavis.
What's that?
I don't think there's a need to muddy the waters here by having our gas stations all of a sudden dispensing food and qualifying as drive-throughs. And that's not the subject of the drive-through restaurant exercise anyway.
Correct.
Purely
I just-
restaurants.
I just want to make sure if gas stations becomes a standalone entity, it is clear that it's not also captured in the definition of drive-through.
Yep.
And I say that because on a regular basis, I will say the logical minds goes to the ordinance in trying to evaluate whether a proposed project needs site plan, needs subdivision, needs this, needs a variance, needs this. And it's very tricky. There are a number of trippers that are unintended in the ordinance. I just don't want to add to them. It's not hard work. We just have to make sure we don't inadvertently, as happened when Pine Hill was into its current edition, things were inadvertently moved, and I want to avoid those.
Okay,
Can
well,
I add to that a little bit? If you go a little bit farther down in the red here, we get down into new and used car dealers. They use volatile fuels and keep it stored as well. Automotive repair shops, the same. They're doing the same bit. And as I read that, I went, where's small engine repair shops? Why is it only automotive repair shops?
Well, if we scroll up, where is it?
Because they also store the same sort of thing.
Those are
But
uses
those would
in-
be accessory too. So if
Right.
you had an auto dealership that also did that, that storage would be incidental and subordinate to, the primary purpose is to sell vehicles. If they also happen to do oil changes, fluid changes, transmission flushes, what have you, that's an accessory use. That's why at the very bottom it says accessory uses to the above.
Okay, but a small engine repair shop, that's
Small-
what they do.
Small engine repair is not a defined use. About the only place it would fit under current Pine Hill would be considered light industry by definition.
Okay.
But that's a special exception to do small engine repair. The board may say, you know what, maybe light industry is a permitted use, but industry is a special exception use. Industry would be making the parts that make the small engine repair would be
Right.
light industry, which would be servicing.
Yeah, because all of
The
these
pre-assembled
guys with
equipment.
lawnmowers have to drive their stuff somewhere to get it repaired,
Correct.
you know?
okay, go ahead, Mike.
Madam Chairwoman, I think that we ought to direct the planner to craft in the Pine Hill Road Development District permitted uses some additional language for our discussion, which would surround the use of storage facilities for volatile fuels with a special exception, and the same for garages and filling stations with a special exception, and craft something regarding 17553 referring to Pine Hill Road, if that's where the board wants it to go, that would stand. Because right now, we've discussed the issue a lot, and we haven't, I don't think, given Tavis any clear direction of where this board wants him to go with the proposals that he's given to us.
Okay, well, the issues so far are, I mean, that is part of what he has proposed, but some of these other issues the storage and use of heavy industrial or mechanical equipment.
Contractor's yard heavy.
That, okay, but that's a separate issue here.
I'd like to add a word to that line, Kathy. I'd like to add the word fabrication in that line.
Yeah,
Can you point to where you're talking about, Julie?
We're in the red section on page 2 of 3. Way down at the bottom, storage and use of heavy industrial or mechanical equipment.
Which section are we looking at? Pine Hill Road?
The final, yeah, the
yes.
final Pine Hill with everything.
The smushed together everything. Way near the bottom. The last one says lumber yards. On the very bottom of the page in red, it says lumber yards.
Section M.
yeah, right.
Okay? The one right above it says storage and use of heavy industrial.
Right,
Don't seem to have that.
He's not there yet.
or mechanical equipment.
Mike's not there. Yeah, or mechanical equipment. But when I read that, I immediately said, where's fabrication? Because metal shops don't necessarily fabricate. And if you're saying you can't do any fabrication, you've got heavy industrial equipment, you're kind of leaving them so, okay, we can't fix our stuff?
So the definition, the current definition of light industry, the manufacturing, production, processing, fabrication, assembly, repair, and packaging of products predominantly from previously prepared or refined materials. The storage, warehousing, distribution, or wholesaling of finished products shall be considered accessory to and incidental to the light industry use. Light industry does not include uses with significant external effects as indicated below or which pose significant risks to public health, safety, and welfare, including but not limited to storage of chemicals, poisons, pesticides, explosives, or other hazardous or toxic materials. Further, light industrial uses shall not create excessive smoke, noise, dust, soot, vibration, odor, or other public nuisance. And the reason I think all of that is included was actually added in March of 2020, by the way, is that by definition, it doesn't need a special exception. So that's why I would suggest light industry remain as a permitted use, not a special exception use.
Okay.
So if somebody were to propose something that crosses those thresholds, it would become industry and then warrant the special exception. Currently, I put light industry and industry right next to each other because light industry was allowed. Bear with me. Light industry was allowed in C2.
Oh, special exception in Pine Hill.
Correct.
Yep.
Light industry was special exception in Pine Hill. My recommendation, and the reason I put it in where I did here, is I put industry in special exception. My recommendation would be to move light industry up to the top, because by definition, it is established as meeting the thresholds of the special exception, which are noise, vibration, soot, smoke, etc. I don't know where the planning board wants to land on
As
that.
long as we have it somewhere, it's an important thing to have. We can't just
Yeah, but we
do
don't want
without.
it to, do we want to surround it with that many protections? Do we want to make it that difficult for a young guy with a pickup truck wanting to get into business for himself to have to jump through a special exception hoop as well as?
Well, that's why I would say light industry could be a permitted use, because by definition,
Take it out of
it
the
meets the
special
standard.
exception?
But industry stay as a special exception.
Okay.
Agreed.
Oh,
That's
okay.
good. That's good.
Yeah, right, yes, that is good.
I mean, I personally would move half of the list under M into special exceptions. You know,
Half of
things
the
of
list under-
storage of volatile fuels, car dealers, heavy industrial mechanical equipment, about lumberyards, but it just seems like some of these are more egregious than boatyards or cemeteries for human beings, you know.
I think that's initially why they were in C2, but C2 has been kind of decimated,
Yeah.
so we're going to put them now.
Right. No, I'm just saying that
I just think
the
they need,
list of
they need attention.
allowed versus special exception, we should just
Yeah.
get placards and debate whether or not they meet or something.
Well,
Move them up and down the
I would
list.
suggest that The majority of the Pine Hill District was originally the industrial park.
Right.
And that's why these
Yes.
uses were permitted uses. Because as Mike suggested earlier, it's out where you can't see it. I don't know how a newer used car dealership isn't frankly retail. So to hold it to the test of a special exception seems a bit excessive to me. That's just me personally. Same with lumber yards and sale and distribution of building supplies. That is basically a commercial use.
But the things that are currently under special exceptions are light industry, boatyards, and cemeteries. Those seem to be pretty benign.
Well, let me put some, I don't think cemeteries needs to be a special exception. I'm just highlighting where it is. These
I
aren't my
think they have such
recommendations.
stringent state law anyway. That,
Let me be clear. All I did was move everything over from where it was to the corresponding location in Pine Hill,
Yeah.
and then I asked the board to discuss. Boatyards, I think probably should be a special exception
Yep.
because of what tends to happen with them. It's not the boats or the storage, it's everything surrounding it, as you all addressed at your last meeting. Contractors' yards, probably a special exception. Something for the board to consider is whether contractor's yard light still needs a special exception, question mark, or whether it's only those with the heavy vehicle traffic, i.e. a contractor's yard, that have the larger vehicles that cause the noise. The bigger the truck, the bigger the tailgate, the bigger the bang, literally.
Literally.
The louder the institution. So somebody that has a variety of mulches that they might provide to a customer, is it really a contractor's yard because they have bulk deliveries of mulch and they take it out and deliver it to people? Does that really warrant a special exception for contractor's yard light? So that's the smaller vehicles. That's the only distinction between light and regular, is the size traffic and the regularity of that traffic. But I firmly believe if someone is dealing as a wholesale gravel distributor, it probably warrants some more attention. Does it warrant a special exception? That's personal opinion. But for consistency, it seems we need to even it out. If there's only one zone where you can do any of this stuff, we need to figure out where the higher degree of scrutiny comes in, and that would be my suggestion to you.
Yeah,
I can make recommendations, but
I would remove that from special exception uses for the Pine Hill Road Development District. The intent of that district was to attract and foster industry in the town, give industrial uses some place in the town where they could set
So
themselves up.
move all contractor yards out to
Contractor
permitted or
yard light out of special exception.
Yeah,
But I
Right,
think
which it
heavy.
is. I
agree.
I'm sorry.
which it is. The contractor's yard light.
Is out of special exception uses?
Yeah, yes, it's just a permitted use, according to this.
Okay.
Well, it's actually
in both.
175-96-1E. It's a special exception right now in Pine
Yeah.
Hill for
That's a-
contractor's
Well,
yard light.
That's he was talking about the contractor's yard light.
Right.
Correct. Currently, it's listed in Pine Hill as a special exception.
Right.
Okay, well, I'd like to know what I'm looking at then.
I know it's very confusing.
Yeah, because it's number N in Pine Hill.
It's also E under 175.
Yes, it's
that's the
confusing.
problem.
It's confusing.
Yeah, no, I see that, but it doesn't say light.
Yeah, it does. Under E.
Yeah, I'm looking at it.
special exception.
Contractor's yard.
Light. Well, on my paper, it says light.
No, Kathy's right. It's listed, let me find it again. It's N under permitted uses
Yep.
Yes, right.
and E
That's the light.
under
Not
special
permitted.
exception.
And E is contractor's yard, no light.
Heavy.
I have
Heavy's the
light.
word, heavy.
The online version has light in both.
Yeah.
I'll fix it. I get the gist.
So special exception should be just regular contractor shorts.
Got it.
That's it.
Okay,
Thank you.
this is weird.
Certainly is, but it's fixed now.
Well, there's another interesting one. Let me see if I can find it. I wasn't going to bring it
Okay,
up
because I
now that
thought,
we're
okay,
parsing this
well,
out.
good.
Well, while you're looking for that, can I jump ahead a little bit farther? Why do we have hospitals for the treatment of human beings but not veterinarian hospitals? Are they listed anywhere else
I'm not
for
aware of any.
vets?
Yeah, I see that. I've got one that says.
While we're thinking about that, the current,
Contractor's yard, this is
Yep.
Pine Hill, no light, and then I go over here and it says light.
actually, the current C2 zone, listen here, the wording is fun. C2L, in the C2 district, contractor's yard, comma, light, comma, are permitted by special exception in the Pine Hill district. So getting rid of C2 will be good, because it's very clear that Pine Hill moved into C2 clumsily.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
we'll parse it out.
Yeah, right, I noticed that too. I thought that was kind of interesting, but
I don't think
whatever.
that's what anyone meant, but there it is.
Okay, Tavis.
Yes,
Why don't you take another go with this?
I'm gonna
Based
take-
on this discussion? and-
Tonight's feedback, I'll incorporate
Yeah.
it, make some changes.
Right.
I'm going to get rid of the highlighter, I'm going to type it up and put down
Okay,
where I think I heard the board landing on several things. If the board discussion in my head when I'm typing it up wasn't clear, I'm going to put it in both in a different color. So we need to land on some conclusion there, and then we'll go
yeah,
forward from
right.
there.
Okay. Okay, well, that was fun.
And look at that, now we can skip the next item on the agenda. Surprise.
Jeez.
I think clearly
okay.
we came up with no on that one.
All right. Let me see. Oh, okay, so is everybody ready to move on to the next one here? Okay, because the next one is the proposed revisions to the Wolfeboro Falls Limited Business District. Do we want to put that one on hold for now?
Well, the only thing proposed in there was moving sexually oriented businesses to Wolfeboro Falls, because that was my understanding of at least
Yeah.
a couple of board members wanted to go. I will withdraw that, and I will move that to special exception with the greatest number of permitted restrictions possible as a special exception in Pine Hill.
Okay, all right. Very good. Okay, so the next issue is the Filter Bed Road Committee zoning map changes.
So the memo I put together here was quite literally a quick and dirty explanation of how the zoning map would change based on the Filter Bed Road Subcommittee discussion of where the new boundary would be of the Bay Street Limited Business District.
One additional parcel.
What's that?
One additional parcel.
One more?
Yep.
Which one?
See, I thought I went too far. I thought
No, you didn't go, I checked it, according to what my notes show from our discussions, you have everything but one property. It's tax map number 9.
is the 9 on it is in?
Yep.
Okay.
Which one is that, Mike? Which one is 9?
Just
Center
across-
top.
Top center has a 9 in it.
Boy,
See at the very top?
Was that the Kimball lot?
Yeah, it's green, it's a Kimball lot.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I see it.
So it's the one with the two garages?
You just
with
wanted
the
to walk.
garages? Yeah, because this was what I went by.
Oh, you have it right there. Take a look at number 9. Turn the page over.
Okay. Yeah, right, right.
And can you explain this really weird little
Well, into the...
trapezoid
brown.
jog? What's that? Oh, but they're separate lots.
But Vaughn, it kind of looks like they're together because the same owner owns those with the house on it.
They're together, but they're two separate parcels. I don't know why the decision originally wasn't, this is on the opposite side from the condos. Why the back parcel wasn't rezoned, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's probably so wet you can't do
I
anything.
think that's why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just looks like a really odd thing on a zoning map.
It will fix under the new map.
Well, if you think
Because it
back,
would all
all
be
those
red.
lots there probably were all carved off by one person over time, if you think about it. And I think that's how they ended up with just the one that nobody could build on.
On the west side, if we assume that the top is north, the one that has the word road in it, that is the condominium, and the decision was very clear not to include the condos in that zone.
Okay, all right, so this map came from the Filter Bed Road Committee.
Correct.
And we had a couple meetings, several meetings, and basically had some folks from outside the planning board sit in with us and came up with the idea of changing these properties to a Bay Street limited business district in order to give some of the property owners a little more flexibility is what we were trying to do. And so that's what the proposal is with number 9.
Yeah, and in addition,
8, yes, and
sorry.
and down to Varney Road.
the,
Number 9 is supposed to be what color?
Everything that is shaded on there, plus the
Light
green
brown.
with the 9 is going to be red for Bay Street Limited.
Right.
light brownie,
Tan.
Julie, or tan, thank you.
The same color as the one with the words filter bed.
Right.
Correct.
Okay, I'm really confused because I missed the last meeting. I thought everything on the right-hand side of Filter Bed Road going up was going to turn red.
It is.
It is.
It is.
Then why is
He's
it brown
just
on
used-
mine?
Because he's used a brown.
All I did was highlight them on the online tax map to show which ones would become red should it move forward.
And the highlighting doesn't show.
It does show. It's showing up as brown.
All the tan color, Julie, turns red.
So we're saying this is going to be red, right?
Picture this color on
Right.
all of these parcels, yes. They're all,
This one too?
yeah, this one, this one, this one, this whole thing.
What about the filter plant? I mean, the sewage treatment plant?
Yeah.
Doesn't make any difference?
Right,
None?
right, no,
And this
it's
one?
okay.
And this
Yeah,
one?
okay, Tavis.
There we go.
Tavis.
So it went farther than my last meeting.
Okay, that is what the committee has brought to this, to the planning board. So this is the discussion that we need to have. And I don't know if you want to discuss it now or put it off for another time.
Discuss.
Well, I'm just asking whether planning board members that were not involved in the discussion.
I wonder if we can think about this without knowing what's allowed in the various zones. I would think we would have to sort that out first and then decide which parcels make sense to move into that zone.
That's what we did.
Yeah, well, that's always the
That was-
question.
That was the point of the Filter Bed Road Subcommittee, to sit down and to see. The original point, I'll be brief, the area is changing. It's under change. The commercial changes that have gone on in that particular part of Filter Bed Road have been by variance. You don't want to zone by variance. Bad thing. So we recognize the fact that there is change in that area. How do you deal with the change? The change seems to be in a direction of commercial. The commercial that's going in is going in by variance. You don't want to do it that way because all kinds of things can go in by variance if you convince the ZBA that it should go in by variance. So what we thought to do was to say, all right, can't leave it residential, can't leave it village residential because you haven't solved the variance problem. So what do you do to allow commercial, but with some controls? So we looked and we saw there are two commercial neighborhoods right nearby, Pine Hill Road and Bay Street Limited Business. Of those two, what can we do? Could we bring Pine Hill Road down, or do we move Bay Street Limited Business District over? If we bring Pine Hill Road Development District down, we're allowing all kinds of major industrial commercial uses to come all the way down to Varney Road. Do we want to do that as a solution to zoning by variance? No. So then we looked at Bay Street Limited Business District and looked at the uses that were typical or allowed, permitted in that district, and they were much lighter. Banks, uses
Retail,
that
housing.
could fit into, uses that could fit into a residential zone without making the residential zone feel like they're in a warehouse district.
Yeah.
So the decision by the board was to move Bay Street Limited Business District over to allow some limited commercial growth, but with protections for residential owners. And that's what the solution we came up with.
So the tan turns to red.
Correct.
And the green number 9.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Okay, so is everybody pretty clear on what we're trying to do?
I am now. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you for letting me see your...
Oh, okay, then. Okay, all right, let's, why don't we put this on for another meeting in either July or August? Okay.
Is there a reason why we can't approve this now?
No, well, I don't know, I thought maybe people would like
My
more
thought
time
again, to
think about
reiterate,
it.
is if we don't know what's allowed yet in the various districts,
Right.
we should let the residents whose properties are changing and the neighbors know what's going to be allowed and not allowed. We haven't settled on that yet.
I think the thought was, that the discussion I'm hearing is, should it come back at a future work session with a printout of the residential and the village residential and the Bay Street Limited and the Pine Hill, ostensibly as amended tonight and later? And
Wasn't that what our subcommittee was charged to do, and isn't that what we did do?
And I'm also hearing a suggestion, there was a committee to come up with a recommendation if the board had questions. But what I'm hearing is
Yeah.
the board might have some questions on the committee without doing some more research. So the board can continue this for discussion at a later date with some more information, and I'm pretty clear on what board members are interested in seeing. Or the board can make a motion to set a public hearing and allow public input and further discussion at that point before recommending it to the warrant. So everything's on the table.
Could I make a request that when we're comparing those three districts, that it be a spreadsheet-like thing where it's allowed here and not here, and what's allowed and not allowed, in the same way that when you're getting a rental car or you're buying something and you're going to compare the whatever it is.
Which data plan do I want?
Right,
What's
you
included?
know, and so this is one district, this is another, what's allowed, what's allowed, and what's not allowed. And I think that would make it easier to make the comparisons.
I can do that. Interestingly enough, I'm actually working on that for all zones so that the board would have some ability to look at it.
Oh, that'll be helpful.
Then I'd be happy to make a motion that we, as a board, reconsider this zoning map change with the benefit of the spreadsheet layout that Tavis is going to prepare for us. And I'd like to suggest that we schedule this for a date certain, rather than putting it
You
on the
mean for
work plan.
another planning board discussion?
Well, that seems to be what the planning
Yeah,
board wants to
right.
do.
Okay.
So when would we want to schedule that?
Either July or August?
July 20th would be the next work session.
July 20. That would be part of my motion then.
Okay, so that's your motion? Okay, I'll second that. All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Now, I'm going to do that based on what each zoning district says right now.
Yes.
Yep,
I might need to put some asterisks in on Pine Hill.
probably a good idea.
Right.
I just don't want people to get too confused.
Well, don't make the asterisks too big or weird colors.
Well, it's,
The reason I mention is the board might come to a different decision between current Pine Hill and current Bay Street Limited going on the filter bed. And I just want to remind people that you're also looking at changing Pine Hill for a much inflated gamut of uses.
I think at the end of the day, the decision is going to be the same as it was, as the subcommittee came to, especially with the proposed changes to Pine Hill Road, which was something the subcommittee had considered as
Agreed.
part
I
of its
just wanted to be
deliberation.
clear on what spreadsheet
Just,
we can
yeah,
put the
make
time
sure it's
into. Yeah.
made clear on the spreadsheet.
oh, okay. All right, let's see, let's go on to committee reports, the stormwater. Wolfeboro Waters is doing their thing and would like to be on the agenda for the second meeting in July. And I believe that Conservation Commission may have also discussed the issue at their meeting yesterday, I think, was their meeting. So we should be able to get that moving again. The drive-through, let's see,
Madam Chair, I just left these on in case there was any update. I'm assuming since drive-through hasn't met that it remains the same for the 8th.
right.
Yeah, the only update I have is that the first notice has gone into the paper, and we're on track for the second notice to go into the paper.
Okay, I can maybe, beg pardon, add something additional. I counted on Facebook as of day before yesterday, 72 comments about drive-through restaurants, pro and con. I did not make a tally of how many, but clearly this is an issue that the community is interested in a rather big way, bigger than I had anticipated. We have, do you want to talk about survey?
The survey results are coming in as well. It's still ongoing.
Oh, I
We
didn't
had
know it was open.
53 survey results in
If the
from our
committee-
online
if
survey.
the committee or the board would like, I'm happy to put that rather prominently on the town website,
What's that?
Yes,
the link to the
please.
survey.
Yes, I didn't realize that it was open yet.
Me either. If you-
It's on
if you-
Facebook.
I can-
Could you, I know you listed it there, but you didn't say that voting was open.
Yeah, I did.
Did you?
Yep, it's right in the little notice.
I missed that
That's
part.
why Susan's gotten 43 or 53
Yeah.
notices of
Well, I
completed
shared it.
surveys. Pardon?
I shared it.
Well, and it's, the notice has gone in the Granite State, first of 2 notices. I contacted the Granite State. They would be happy to receive a press release regarding the July 8 forum. So somebody's got to write a press release and get it off to GSN. And does that press release need to be cleared by the board before it's inserted? Or can it
No,
simply
not
be
if the
written?
board agrees that it's okay, and they have so far. Does anybody have any?
I think it's okay if one of the
yeah.
subcommittee people does it, because that's what you were working on. I think we can trust you.
All right, then the subcommittee among ourselves will discuss who is going
Okay,
to write the
and
press
get it
release.
to Tavis, I guess.
Well, I'll send it, or whoever writes it will send it to GSN, send it to the editor with a copy to Tavis.
Yeah, I think you probably better copy him just for the legal trail, you know, when you do that.
Okay, whatever.
Yeah.
It's an email, that's fine.
Okay. That's all I have on
Oh,
drive-through.
okay, and lighting committee?
Lighting committee, I believe, is going to have another meeting. I'm going to get an email out to the chair of the subcommittee and members just to see how they want to proceed and wrap up.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, the next item is opportunity for public comments.
You need it for TV.
Oh, all right. Anyways, so I'm Chris Kawash. and I'm here to speak on the short-term rental issue. I am glad that this committee decided, at this point at least, not to change the single-family dwelling definition. I really believe that that will be a mistake. I'm probably unique, except for maybe from the letters from Audrey Klein, in our positions on short-term rentals. I have never asked for them to be controlled. I have never asked for them to be in certain zoning districts. My issue, which started this, and I know Kathy's going to say, I heard this again, 2 years ago, this October, my letter, which I was asked by the planning officer, or whatever you call him, planning, the town manager, to submit complaints or issues that I had with short-term rental in writing. That's what started this whole short-term rental thing. As far as I know, it was brought up to this planning board. I'm standing here now, more than a year and a half later. 0 of those issues, my issues, were solely licensure so the town could get their 40% from these places. That there were over 300 in this town that were not licensed, and also that there's life safety issues. I pointed out things such as garages being converted into a bedroom, tool shacks being converted into a bedroom and being rented, and nothing being done. Pottery studios being converted, where this planning board specifically said that is not supposed to be a bedroom. We're only giving you permission for a pottery studio. That was converted into a room for rent under these B&B problems. So I'm standing here now, more than a year and a half later, and the only thing that's come to this planning board is that enforcement of noise ordinances be done. That was 0 of my issues. So I asked 2 things. Either this planning board, since the short-term rental subcommittee asked about potentially disbanding, that you direct them to address the issue of who has the responsibility in this town for making sure that licensures, regulations, state laws are being complied with when we're putting rental people, transient people at risk. That's always been my issue. I could get into a whole tirade about self-preservation in single family, but I will not do that. So I either ask that, 1, you direct the short-term rental issue committee to address those issues that I brought forth about these places that are not permitted, that are non-compliant, were never brought into the things. You don't even know who's operating a bed and breakfast in this town, which has a different set of regulations. There's also some houses that I can't quite tell whether or not they truly are rooming houses, because I'm aware of one place that has 7 rooms for rent. None of that was brought up. I went to every one of the short-term rental things, and I stood up and I've said this every single time, and not once was the discussion about any of those issues. And it came back to you as noise ordinances. That's my first question to you. And I would like a response at some point. But my second thing is I deserve the courtesy of a response to my letter that was sent to this town, to this planning board, on my issues. I was told that that was required to get anything moving. I have not heard a response on whether or not this town believes that it's not their responsibility to make sure that they are not commercials, but they are businesses. It doesn't turn a home into a residence. That's why I applaud you for not changing that definition, but they are businesses. 40% of that business tax comes back to this town. You have over 300 places where you could be collecting revenue from, and you're not sure what they're doing. I would like a response on whether or not it's this town's responsibility to determine where businesses are operating. I'm not asking for regulation of them. You already have things in place to do this. The state has laws that businesses must have a license. If that's the state's problem, let me know that. If the responsibility of somebody converting their underground garage into a room for rent is not the responsibility of this town, I would like to know that. I would like a response to my issues that I set forth, or I would like this committee to direct that subcommittee to address those issues. Because whether or not you start regulating it now, you're still not going to have anything in your regulations or your requirements for licensing. You're not going to have anything about allowing the code officer to come in because you converted your shack in your backyard, your tool shed, into a residence, or your basement into a residence, or your attic with a pull-down step, not even a fixed step to go into the attic and convert it into a room. If that's not this town's responsibility, I would like to know that you are not responsible for the life safety or any of those kind of compliance issues that happen with these things in this town. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So
Anyone else?
my comment is that goes way beyond just the short-term rental issue. It's enforcement of regulation across the board.
That it goes beyond the short-term rental?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, right. Did you want to?
I can if you want. The short answer is, and I apologize, nothing has been in writing. The short answer is no, the town does not enforce the collection of rooms and meals tax or the licensure under the state statute.
Right.
That is not a town law, that is a state law, and DRA is responsible for enforcement of their regulations. They are in the same pickle, however, I will segue over. If the town is not made aware of an address where someone converted a chicken coop, attic, or otherwise to living space, even though we're out and about on a regular basis, it's very hard to tell if somebody's renting an attic space with a pull-down ladder because they converted it without a permit. It's very easy to enforce on those things if the town is made aware of that illegal conversion.
Specific instances.
Specific instances, yes. So it's very clear in the town of Wolfeboro that a detached accessory dwelling unit is not permitted. So if an allegation is made that someone is living in a detached structure from the residence, one, we very quickly can go through the file and determine that no conditional use permit was issued for an accessory dwelling unit, and that's further grounds to go after it. If someone has converted a garden shed to a living unit, and there's an allegation of that, that gives the town cause to go on that property, albeit once, to investigate. We can go on and see if it can be determined whether it appears or not, and then the town can go through any number of enforcement mechanisms to bring the violation into compliance. What I don't think the town taxpayers in general are ready to authorize, even if they could, is carte blanche town officials being able to walk onto any property and start looking to see what each person is doing in their respective buildings. So there has to be a complaint or a very clearly observable instance where the code officer happens to go by and see somebody handing, Vaughn's the evil one. Somebody's handing Vaughn money in her front yard and they wave and shake hands as they go into their garage. Something's going on. But if we can't see it, someone else has to see it. People, I understand, don't like to make complaints about their neighbors. Nobody wants to be the narc. But what happens is if the town can't see it happening or witness the event happening, somebody else has to be the witness. Yes, that's the scary part about making a complaint. If the code officer cannot see it, even if there's a complaint and they go on the property and can't see it, the town can still proceed with enforcement, but that complainant then gets called into the court, if you will, as the witness. I saw this happening on this date at this time.
What about advertisements? Advertising for rent?
Advertising for doing it doesn't mean you're doing it. Anecdotally, there are some that would say, well, if I look at such and so a website, and I'm not going to use a name, but you all know where I'm coming from, it says that it's booked all but this 1 week. Is it booked, or is it only available that week?
Right.
That's not enough to go. New Hampshire is a very unique state. For the same reason, the tax assessor cannot use drones to do air photos of your property and then change the assessment based on an observed event. That doesn't count. For the same reason, we can't put a drone up in the air to find out if someone has a dirt bike track and we believe it's too close to a wetland area. We don't get to fly a drone up to prove it. We have to actually gain entry to the property, so there has to be probable cause essentially to go through. It becomes very police-like. I mean, zoning is, let's be clear, zoning is a police power. So it follows very much of that, particularly when you get to the point where someone becomes unwilling to let a town official on the property. Then it is possible to go to the court and get an injunctive search warrant, basically, to go onto the property and investigate. It can go that far. The easiest way, albeit not for the public necessarily, I think so-and-so is doing this because I've seen X, Y, and Z families over this period of time going in and out of the garage, and yet the owner's car is always parked on the side of the house. That's enough. Now, to put potential complainants at ease, if there is a complaint that's submitted and the code officer is able to go on the property and then witness it, yes, the complaint is still a public document, but the witness doesn't need to be called in. The idea is not to get people upset with their neighbors for turning them in. The idea is to get everyone in compliance with the regulations, and I think that was the gist of the comment this evening. So we have the tools to fix those things. We do not have tools to force compliance with state law as far as rooms and meals tax.
It's my understanding, if I could just interject also, it was my suspicion, and I Googled it just to make sure. Yes, vacation rental platforms, including Airbnb, HomeAway, and VRBO, all collect New Hampshire short-term rental taxes for short-term rental hosts when the listing is booked. So all of the online platforms collect the taxes. The state is very good at tracking people down if people are listing their rental on one of those platforms.
Well, wait a minute. You've already had your time, but thank you very much.
I wanted to clarify that issue. That's totally correct, but it doesn't, the state doesn't say that you do not have to comply with the rest of the regulations, such as the ones that I mentioned.
Right.
And the tax collection says that it has to be indicated on the state things. It says that that tax number has to be indicated for every property. Not for them. Our law says each advertisement
Indicated where?
Yeah.
on the listing that's being rented.
It is on the platform.
I have gone
yes.
through a lot of those and they don't do that. And the assumption is that you're following the main thing, so they don't comply, and it doesn't absolve this town of knowing that those businesses are operating. And I just have one other question. So we're not just talking any business that I do in my home, unless somebody complains, the town has no right to come in and see?
What is the avenue to gain the town access to the property?
Unless somebody complains, I could operate anything as a business in my single-family home, and this town would have no problem with that. I just want to make clear of that record, put that on the record that operating a business in town is okay until somebody complains.
That's not exactly.
In a single-family home.
That's not fair.
That's not what was said either.
Well, no, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah,
You said you
okay,
can't come onto the
sir.
property.
That is not a
Thank you
fair
very much
interpretation
for your
of their
comments.
statement. If you're operating a business in your house and you needed a permit and you don't have one, you're in violation. If the town finds out, you're in trouble. The town can only find out if someone tells the town or if you tell the town. But the town is not going to walk into your house and say, "What are you doing in your basement, Joe?" Because the town doesn't have that right.
Yeah, okay, all right, that's enough. That's enough, thank you. Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is...
Public comment.
Oh, well, I have asked several times. Okay.
She's been waiting.
Suzanne Ryan. Tavis, may I have a copy of the attorney's letter that you were referencing this evening in the beginning? Yeah, thank you.
I asked several times, just so everybody is clear. Okay, all set? Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, now on to the Review of the June 1st, 2021 minutes. Anybody have any issues? Corrections?
I think, and you could research this, but on page 2 at the bottom, it said Von Dugan asked for verification and received from Paul Blank that there would be no washing, cleaning of boats. I believe it was repair, washing, cleaning, and repair.
Repairing, okay.
But you might have to verify that because, you know.
Okay, anything else? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Seconded?
Thank you. Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
One other piece of business, under
Yes,
other business.
right, sorry.
The view sheds handout, has that been finalized?
Yes, right.
It's prepared and ready to go in the office?
Almost.
So I'll keep it in my pending file until you advise me that it is now ready to go?
I was handed a 2-page prose document to turn into a flyer. I'm working on turning it into a trifold flyer that's 2-sided, and I'm just wrapping my head around the graphic artist skills required to do that, and perhaps put some photos and soft behind it to make it a bit more visually appealing than just prose.
So it's still pending.
Still pending.
Thank you.
Okay, folks. Motion to adjourn. Second, all in favor? Aye. Thank you. Thanks, folks. That was a good discussion.
Yes.
So how was the EDC meeting?